This is the story of William Devin Howell, a man whose name became synonymous with one of Connecticut's most chilling murder cases. A story that begins, as many do, with a quiet life on the surface and ends in a field of tragedy that would come to be known as the Garden. William Devin Howell was born in 1970. Little is publicly documented about his childhood, but what is known paints a picture of instability. By adulthood, he lived a transient life, moving frequently, often holding short-term or low-paying jobs. He was known to drift between states, relying on odd jobs and temporary housing. In the early 2000s, Howell settled in Connecticut, where he worked as a handyman and operated a small lawn care business. He drove a van he referred to as the Murdermobile, though that name wouldn't take on its full meaning until years later. At this time, there was nothing about Howell that made him stand out. To most, he was simply another man struggling to get by. But beneath that facade, something darker was beginning to take shape. In 2003, his life took a disturbing turn. Between February and October of that year, 7 people went missing. 6 women and 1 man, all connected by a chilling common thread. They were last seen in or around the same area in central Connecticut. The first known victim was Nilsa Arizmendi, a 33-year-old woman from Wethersfield. She was reported missing in July 2003. Her boyfriend told police she had been last seen entering Howell's van. At the time, her disappearance didn't immediately attract public attention. Like several of Howell's victims, Nilsa struggled with addiction and occasionally engaged in sex work. For too long, cases like hers went under-investigated, and that would eventually change, but not for several years. Later that same year, police located Howell in Virginia, where he was living out of his van. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Bloodstains, a mattress, women's clothing, and videotapes. DNA testing later confirmed that the blood belonged to Nilsa Arizmendi. In 2004, Howell was charged with manslaughter in connection to her death. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. At that point, investigators had no idea the full extent of what he had done. It wasn't until 2007, 4 years after the murders, that the case took a much darker turn. In 2007, a hunter stumbled upon human remains in a wooded area behind a shopping plaza in New Britain, Connecticut. Police conducted a search and uncovered multiple sets of remains, all buried in shallow graves. It was later determined that 6 victims had been found in that same location. Forensic evidence eventually linked the remains to Howell. Detectives nicknamed the area the Garden, a grim reflection of how Howell had described it years earlier. In a recorded prison conversation, Howell referred to the site as his garden, saying he dug shallow holes for his girls. It was a statement that would horrify investigators and solidify his reputation as one of Connecticut's most prolific serial killers. A majority of his victims were women living on the margins of society, people Howell exploited precisely because he believed no one would look for them. Investigators believe that Howell targeted them during vulnerable moments, offering rides, money, or companionship before taking their lives. In 2015, while serving time for the manslaughter charge, Howell began talking, both to fellow inmates and to investigators. What he revealed was disturbing. He admitted to killing 7 people in 2003, describing his crimes in unsettling detail. He claimed that he often kept the victims' bodies in his van for days before disposing of them in the garden. He expressed little remorse, saying at one point that he was a sick monster. Investigators later confirmed that Howell had made numerous incriminating statements, some captured on recorded prison calls. These confessions, combined with the forensic evidence, formed the foundation of a new case against him. In 2017, William Devin Howell pleaded guilty to 6 counts of murder. By that time, he was already serving a 15-year sentence for manslaughter. The plea deal spared his victims' families from a lengthy trial. During sentencing, Howell addressed the court. He apologized for his crimes, though his words carried little comfort. The judge sentenced him to 6 consecutive life terms, effectively ensuring that Howell would die in prison. Family members of the victims spoke at the hearing, describing years of pain and unanswered questions. Their statements served as reminders that behind every statistic, there are people, mothers, daughters, and brothers, whose lives were changed forever. Experts who studied Howell's behavior described him as a disorganized offender, impulsive, chaotic, and lacking a clear pattern beyond opportunity. His crimes weren't motivated by greed or revenge, but by compulsion and control. He targeted victims who were isolated or struggling, and he used their vulnerabilities to his advantage. The details suggest a combination of sexual and homicidal impulses, coupled with antisocial personality traits. Though Howell himself claimed he was remorseful, his recorded statements tell a different story, one that leans more towards self-pity than true accountability. The Howell case had a lasting impact on Connecticut law enforcement. It exposed flaws in how missing person cases, particularly those involving sex workers or people with addiction, were handled. In the aftermath, local agencies improved coordination and communication across departments, databases were updated, and cold cases received renewed attention. Forensic advances also played a key role. The identification of the victims relied heavily on DNA testing and the development of forensic anthropology techniques that were still evolving at the time. As of today, William Devin Howell remains incarcerated, serving his sentence at the Cheshire Correctional Institute in Connecticut. Investigators believe that the 7 known victims represent the full extent of his crimes, but there has always been quiet speculation that there could be more. To date, no additional remains have been linked to him. The site of the garden has since been restored, but its legacy endures. Each year, small vigils are held to honor the victims, a testament to the community's effort to remember their names and not just the man who took their lives. The story of William Devin Howell is not one of mystery, but of failure, of how society can overlook the most vulnerable until it's too late. His crimes were not sophisticated. They were brutal, opportunistic, and preventable. If there is one takeaway from this case, it's the importance of awareness and empathy, recognizing that every missing person deserves attention, no matter their background or lifestyle. As investigators, families, and communities continue to seek justice for those lost, the memory of the garden serves as both a warning and a promise that silence and neglect can never again be allowed to hide evil in plain sight.